got a secret. Gunshot sounds were coming from the direction of the Luxor. That's right, the Luxor Hotel. Wait, you've been telling me that the sounds come from the Mandalay Bay? Don't tell Brian. He's gonna go crazy when he finds out. Hey, I've got another secret. Sounds were coming from the dirt mound. Wait, Richard, you've been telling us lies then, haven't you? What's going on here? Richard, if their sounds come from everywhere, doesn't that mean there are multiple shooters? Come on now. Good evening and welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds. Hope you enjoyed that little introduction there. And for those that are the astute observer and who've been long-time subscribers to this channel, you will have been able to answer every single question posed. For those not quite so familiar with the work done of this channel here, what you have just been introduced to is the complexities and conundrums caused by the supersonic cracks produced by a supersonic projectile, even a rifle. As we can see from the diagram, the bullet leaving the weapon, being supersonic, goes out at a distance and it creates a supersonic cone indicated by the red lines here. Now this is a 2D projection of a 3D phenomena. But anyway, the front sides of that cone propagate, which in the case to the south side here are the little red dotted lines, until they arrive at Officer Bob's camcorder. Similarly, had Officer Bob been directly on the other side, the other waves would have propagated out and reached him in a similar fashion. And that's for the shock wave. Now the bullet had to travel some distance down there before it reached the point where the supersonic cone would eventually leave the bullet path and then eventually propagate out to Officer Bob. And the red arrow indicates the direction of the propagation of that supersonic leading edge, and the blue line over here indicates the propagation direction of the muzzle blast, which is a completely different phenomena than the supersonic crack. The muzzle blast is, of course, spherical in nature and propagates evenly out in all directions, whereas the supersonic crack, which is produced by the leading edge of the supersonic cone reaching the recorder, is more akin to a line or propagation, but it's really a cone. But anyway, it travels not equally, but it's in essentially straight lines from where it was generated, right parallel to the Mach angle. So, in the case where the angle of fire, i.e., this distance between the line of fire and the muzzle blast is small, then we arrive at this situation where the supersonic crack that gets recorded at Officer Bob's camera is produced very close to him, and therefore when the crack reaches the recording or Officer Bob's ears, then he will have to look at the source of the sound, which is the source which is produced by the bullet. Now the bullet's long since disappeared, and that will be, if he had been looking at the weapon, it would be to his right. So in the case where the weapon is at the Mandalay Bay, Officer Bob, when he hears the supersonic crack, will look to his right, off towards the direction of the Luxor Hotel. Got one question answered, didn't we? Now, had Officer Bob been on the other side, since the supersonic cone is symmetrical about the line of fire, then this green thing would have been just reversed, and he would have been, well, let's just draw a line. He would have been looking at a line of fire, a direction of arrival of the supersonic crack from this direction, which would be more south of the Luxor, south of the Mandalay Bay. So, but the important point to take away here is that for small angles of fire, the supersonic crack appears to come from a completely different direction than where the weapon is located, a completely different direction than from where the muzzle blast comes from. Now, Officer Bob here would hear two sounds. First, he'll hear the supersonic crack, and then sometime later he'll hear the muzzle blast wave. So he hears one sound coming from the direction of the Luxor and one sound coming from the Mandalay Bay. Can you say confusion? And so most of the officers close to Officer Bob would hear a similar thing. On the other side of the line of fire, which may be just a few feet away, those officers would hear just the opposite. They would say that the crack is coming from south of the Mandalay Bay and the muzzle blast is coming from the Mandalay Bay. So you have complete confusion there. Now, the further away from this area, now you notice I've purposely not put any distance on this. And so if Officer Bob had been way out in the venue and he was still close to the line of fire, then the green line would probably pointed more towards the Excalibur, and if Officer Bob was on the other side, then it would indeed have pointed towards, you guessed it, the dirt mound. So, when people like Hoover come out and say, well, on Cop Corner, which is, Cop Corner is the area where Mandalay Bay and the South Vegas Boulevard intersect there, when all those officers there were trying to guess where the sound was coming, or where the shooter was, they really were asking the wrong question. It should have been, where was the sound coming from? The sound was coming from two different places. And you necessarily should have relied upon the muzzle blast to determine where it was from. But in the heat of the battle, without understanding the acoustics without understanding gunshot acoustics, all is to be expected: chaos and confusion. So that's basically it. I mean, you have everything here you need to know except how to calculate it. Now, in the case where the angle of fire becomes large, like greater than 60 degrees typically, then both the muzzle blast wave and the supersonic crack appear to come from the area where the shooter is located, or close to it. But when the angle of fire is small, i.e. when the shock wave is loud, then it's just the opposite. The supersonic crack appears to come from, and indeed does come from, an area different than where the muzzle blast wave comes from. Once you understand it, it's pretty straightforward and trivial. But calculating it all is not. Alright, so in this diagram, the blue indicates the propagation direction of the muzzle blast wave, the red indicates the muzzle propagation of the supersonic cone, the purple indicates the direction from which the muzzle blast wave appears to come, and the green indicates the direction from which the supersonic crack appears to come from. Very good. Let me know how you like my new style of introducing things.